And so on to Capetown, the jewel in the calendar. Hosted along the coastline of South Africa, it is quite a lovely place to race, although not an easy place to pass or race on, as the drivers well know. Speaking of drivers, there was a change in drivers for this race, as Javier Vasquez, after his crash in Munich, suffered a dislocated shoulder and would be out for many, many weeks. He said that he would try to return as soon as possible, but effectively his career is basically over. Although he said he wanted to at least finish the season for Ford and for himself. Coming in to replace him is Car 47, Jens Bergman, Ford's rookie driver from Sweden. A new face in the paddock, and also a familiar face from the junior ranks. He has not done a serious race in about a year, but he's planning to do his best for Ford by simply just bringing the car home in one piece and not crashing on the tiny twisty street circuit of Cape Town. Other than that, the Peugeot team has finally figured out what was wrong with their car. It was their wheelbase that was causing all their acceleration issues. A slightly too long wheelbase, along with materials for their gearbox, just simply not gelling well with the car, and the engine as well. So they would have to redesign their whole car, ideally for next season, to be able to truly fix that issue. Wexler was happy after his home race and was looking to try and keep the momentum going, as to try and prevent Chapman from gaining momentum before his home race in Guilford next time out. Other teams had brought in some minor upgrades for Cape Town, mainly some front wings and a few new brakes as well for some of the teams. But most teams were saving upgrades for Guilford or for the race after that at Milan, Ferrari's territory. But with that out of the way, qualifying began for the tight twisty street ticker with track positions. Qualifying produced some interesting results due to wet weather, as for the first time, Aki Lipinen would start on pole position for the race, with Jens Bergman, the rookie, a brilliant second place. Dieter Wexler and Nina Holtz would be third and fourth, with their teammates following behind in fifth and sixth. Zoe Sharp and Nikolai Surikov would be on the fourth row, Lucia Flores and Sierra Lundqvist making surprise appearances in Q3 as well. The flying Rick DeGraff was 11th, alongside Anna Oliveira. Jenny North was a frustrated 13th, after her teammate qualified on the front row. The BMWs were struggling horrendously on the circuit, not getting the power down out of the corners, being 16th and 19th respectively. CRS teammate Cora was 20th, with the Maseratis and Alfa Romeos near the back of the field, with Rick Castley starting at the back due to a very poor qualifying indeed. With the 5 lights turning on, it was time for the race, with Bergman trying desperately to get a good start, which he did, to much of the field's surprise, as the field piled into turn 1 for the first lap. Bergman tried to send it down to the inside of Aki Lipinen, but at the back there was a problem, as Kofi Koro ran into the back of somebody and then lost his front wing, got a puncture off his own front wing, and crashed into the runoff at turn 1. With the safety car being deployed, quite a few cars chose the opportunity to pit, either due to poor initial starts, or they were running in the top 10. So they proceeded to go into the pit lane, and around half the field chose to pit under the safety car, leaving the order very jumbled, with Dieter Wexler, the first car on fresh tires, running 11th, with Aki Lipinen still leading, Bergman third, Sharp fourth, Lucia Flores now running fourth, both of the Peugeots running in the top 10, and the two Asia road racing cars both running in the top 10 as well. So the safety car pulled in at the end of lap 7, going on to lap 8. A very long safety car to clean up all the debris in turn 1. As Bergman and Aki led the field back underway, as Sharp tried to gain ground, but was unable to pass the Ford and the Renault in front of her on the opening restart. Battles were Meanwhile, further behind, Wexler got a great restart, moving up a place already, passing Casterly's Asia Road Racing car, and then proceeding to make another brilliant move through the fountain to get alongside and eventually pass Alejandro Moreno in the Alfa Romeo up into ninth place. A brilliant rest- a brilliant restart for the Ferrari. There was trouble. There was going to be trouble ahead as he had to try and pass the other cars until Sharp, Wexler, and a few others all pitted at the end of lap 8, going on to lap 9. The reason was due to the debris being missed on the outside edge of the corner, on the outside edge of turn 2 on the hairpin, which ended up causing a slow puncture on all those cars as they ended up pitting and getting sent to the back. A major disappointment for Sharp and Wexler, as both of them were looking for good results, and Holtz simply was caught out as well, which now left the running order with the two Peugeots in the top 5. Lucia Flores running third for the Toyota, and further behind, teammate Rick DeGraff also running the top 10, battling the Asia Road Racing cars of Casterly and Hamrin, with Hamrin being in front of Casterly. Nikolai Surkov was still in the race, running in sixth, and unfortunately not making much of an impact as the cameras focused on the battle between the Toyota and the Toyota and the Asia Road Racing, with Toyota power proving to be more superior on the straight than the Mugen of the Asia Road Racing cars. Further back, Nilo Sarian was finally making ground, pulling off a clean overtake on Harry Chapman, who had stayed out, and was up into 10th place, chasing after Nina Holtz, who on fresher tires with Dieter Wexler had slowly been cycling up the field as all the ultra soft runners had began to pit, which included the race leader Aki Lippinen pitting at the end of lap 24, going on to 25. As Jens Bergman, the rookie, took over the lead of the race and led his first ever Grand Prix. A truly surprising result for the Ford team, as they were expecting the car to be good, but they weren't expecting to be on the front row, let alone actually leading the race. Granted, there was strategy involved in this, but Bergman was in fact leading the race, as Aki Lippinen got his fresh tires up to temperature and began chasing down the Ferraris and Mercedes, as Bergman pitted a few laps later and came out in the middle of traffic. As Siri Lundqvist was trying to make up places as well, having pitted earlier under green, leaving teammate Esteban Ribeiro on the super soft tire as the race leader, with Rick Casterly running second, Sharp running third, and Hamrin running fourth. Both Asia Road Racing cars starting on the super soft tire, which was apparently working brilliantly for their cars. As Aki Lippinen began to try to do the impossible and pass Harry Chapman while in an inferior car. He almost managed it going into the fountain chicane, but was unable to do so. Several laps later, he tried again, trying to go around the outside, but unable to do so. As Rick Casterly, now running third, having been passed off screen by Sharp, was brilliantly defending off not only the Mercedes of Nina Holtz, not only the Ferrari of Nilo Sarian, not only the former race leader Aki Lippinen in the Renault, but also defending world champion Harry Chapman in the second Mercedes. He was proceeding to hold off all of them as Esteban Ribeiro began desperately trying to defend his lead from Zoe Sharp, who was on fresher tires compared to the Peugeot. As Aki Lippinen finally, off screen, managed to make the move coming out of the hairpin and past Harry Chapman, as Sarian managed to somehow pass Zoe Sharp, tried to make the pass around Zoe Sharp, but failed to do so, leaving the door open for the Renault to sneak through the inside in the parking lot hairpin, and sneak up into fifth place. It was brilliant racing up and down the field, with battles happening all over the place. As Ribeiro finally gave up the lead to Zoe Sharp, as Jens Bergman set the fastest lap while making a charge through the midfield. As Aki Lippinen showed his ultra soft tires still had plenty of grip in them, as he managed to make the move on the apparently immovable Rick Casserly's Asia Road Racing car. Further behind, Neil Asarian dropped back behind both of the Mercedes, his tires beginning to fall off compared to the rest of the field. Further on, Cassidy was still defending well from the Mercedes and the Ferraris, showing no signs of being under pressure from anybody. Granted, off-screen Chapman did overtake him, but he was still defending very well indeed in a car that has been underperforming and been underpowered compared to most of the field so far this season. Could he keep it up and maybe score the team their first ever points of the season? Only time would tell as the race neared its halfway mark. Further back, Wexler was still struggling to make any sort of ground on the leaders or make any impact in the race. As Casserly tried to defend from Holtz, but finally gave up the unequal struggle as his super soft tires began to wear even further compared to the rest of the field. Casserly being the only man to still be out on his starting set of tires, as Jens Bergman had to come in with a slow puncture due to tapping a wall somewhere on track, and having to pit for a fresh set of super soft tires, dropping him down to 21st. As pole sitter Aki Lippinen pitted from third place for another set of ultra soft tires just before the halfway mark, and Neil Asarian, whose car was fading on old tires, pitted for ultra soft tires as well, and rejoined the race as well, stuck in 20th place. Meanwhile, while the race was still progressing, battles were still continuing for the final points position as Iker Vidal, Rick DeGraff, and Maria Gonzalez were battling for the position. Someone who was trying to get back into points was Esteban Ribeiro, who made contact with Patricia Atia, and both suffered damage: a puncture on the CRS car and suspension damage on Ribeiro's car that needed fixing as the car was starting to crab walk down the straight. They both slowly returned to the pit lane, both of their races well and truly ruined. But their misfortune, along with Aki Lippinen making a mistake, was the gain for Blanc and Olivier, gaining up into 11th and 12th place respectively, as Casserly, having gone over half the race on his set of supersofts, was still stubbornly refusing to pit, and was still managing to hold off Nina Holtz and the surprise charger of Wolfgang Schmidt. Until on lap 43, Zoe Sharp lost control going through the bus stop chicane at the end of the lap and crashed hard into the wall, triggering a safety car, which would shake up the strategy to no end. As rain was finally being spotted off in the distance, coming from the coastline, and was predicted to hit the circuit soon. With that information in mind, the Mercedes team called Harry Chapman in, which, along with most of the rest of the field, who pitted, left the running order very different, with Nikolai Surkov and Wolfgang Schmidt leading the field back to the restart, with Rick DeGraff running third, and one of the Renaults running fourth, before Chapman easily muscled his way by, as Schmidt Schmidt, DeGrasse Toyota, and Nikolai Surikov began to try and sprint away from the rest of the field during the short amount of time they had left. As Siri Lundqvist began showing her mettle on new ultra salt tires, trying to make her way through the field, even beginning to try and challenge Neil Sarian as well. Sarian wasn't giving up though, and neither was Chapman or Wexler, who are now back in the fight after the strategy shenanigans earlier in the race. As they moved on as the first flying lap finished, Chapman muscled his way by Rick DeGrasse Toyota up into third place until running wide on the marbles in the hairpin, made him run wide, lose grip, almost lose the car, and drop down to 17th place with the field so tightly packed. Dropping to 17th place, Chapman now had to get his foot down if he wanted to try and regain the lost ground, as championship rival Wexler was now up into third, having also passed Rick DeGraff in the melee. With Siri Lundqvist fighting Nina Holtz for seventh, and Schmidt and Surikov still proceeding to lead the race, but with charging Wexler behind, it wasn't looking good. They needed the rain to show up soon. However, it would not. A few off screen after a few laps of trying, Wexler managed to muscle his way by Surikov and Schmidt, with Surikov dropping down the field, dropping to 5th place after a few laps. Lipinen was up into second again, and was still charging, trying to see if he can make an impact on Wexler's lead. Holtz was up into third. Schmidt still running fourth, the only man on the yellow striped soft tire. Surikov was fifth. Oliveira muscling her way by the Honda up into fifth place. As she began to work on the BMW, as Siri Lundqvist began to try and work on the Honda, easily muscling her way by the Honda, who was struggling on old tires. As the Honda continued to struggle and plummet down the field, unseen by the cameras, Archer Vidal and Rick DeGraff were making pushes up the field. DeGraff having pitted, and Iker Vidal on a charge of his own. Vidal moving up into 10th place as Lundqvist continued to make moves. Trying to make a move on the Honda, as Siri Lundqvist was defending from the Honda, as the rain began to appear with just over 20 laps to go in the race. It would make things very tricky indeed as the conditions began to dampen, and it would be a race to the pit lane to see who would put on what tire, intermediates, full wet, or even stay out and hope it was just a brief shower. It was very tense stuff, as the track normally filled with a lot of oil and rubber would be very slippery in the intermediate conditions, as Siri Lundqvist was finding out her car not handling well on the intermediate tires, as she struggled for grip, losing position to Neil Osarian, who was on a comeback drive of his own. As Oliveira's Renault engine expired very smokily, the engine surprisingly having overheated in the conditions. With Oliveira out, that brought the fight for the final points position back into play. With Iker Vidal now getting promoted up into 9th, Rick DeGraff back up into 10th, and Maria Gonzalez running in 11th place, as Vidal in the Maserati began to work his magic and make a move on the Persia of Siri Lundqvist ahead. The Swede desperately trying to defend and score points for the first time since her race win in China several races earlier. It was not to be, as Lundqvist made the same mistake that Chapman made, getting offline and dropping several places coming out of the turn 2 hairpin, which now promoted Maria Gonzalez back into the points. And with full wets approaching, it looked like the race was all over bar the shouting, as Gonzalez moved up into the points and dropping both of the forwards into a frustrating 11th and 12th.
particularly frustrating for Jens Bergman, who had been doing so well up until his slow puncture, forcing an early pit stop. But as the cars came in pitting for full wets with just under 10 laps to go, it looked Wexler was still leading the field as the rest of the field began to put the full wet tire on. Wexler ahead of the two Mercedes. Schmidt still in an excellent fourth. Schmidt was running an excellent fourth, which would be dropped to fifth as Aki Lippinen came back to reclaim third place behind Holt, but ahead of Harry Chapman. As the rest of the field dove in, Chapman came out fourth, Schmidt fifth, Sorin and Surkov a frustrated sixth and seventh, Rick de Graaf back up in the eighth, Arca Vidal in the Maserati running a fantastic ninth place, and desperately trying to hold off rookie Jens Bergman as Attia's miserable weekend came to a close. His crash, aquaplaning and spinning out at the bus stop chicane before the fountain. With Attia's car safely out of the way, no safety car was called with only 6 laps remaining in the race. As Bergman began working over Iker Vidal, trying to get past the Maserati to get more points for the forward team, as Marie Gonzalez stared frustrated at the back of the Ford, while Wolfgang Schmidt's brilliant top 5 run ended as Nilo Sorin made the move going into the bus stop, with Iker Vidal also pulling a Siri Lundqvist and making a mistake, which promoted Gonzalez up into 9th, Bergman up into 8th, and Bergman's teammate North up into 10th, with Esteban Ribeiro staring at the back of the Fords for trying to get the final point. But with the field spreading out and overtaking opportunities limited, it was basically all over, and with a near 10-second gap, Dieter Wexler was trying to stamp his authority on the championship, with all of his title rivals either crashing or having issues of their own. It looked like it was going to. Dieter Wexler was really trying to make this championship fight a one man race, and the only man in that fight would be him. As Wexler came through the final corners to win in Capetown once again, extending his championship leads even further. Nina Holtz would be second, a brilliant third for pole sitter Aki Lippinen, Chapman a frustrated fourth, Sarin would finish in fifth, Schmidt an excellent P6 from 16th on the grid, Nikolai Surkov a disappointing 7th, Bergman managed to hold on to P8 and some points. Ninth was a solid finish for Gonzalez's effort, and Jenny North managed to score 10th and another point for the 4 team as well, which was happy for Javier Vasquez, who was still recovering at home. But with that out of the way, Wexler's lead was up to an almost staggering 47 points in the standings, with the halfway point of the season coming very soon in Guilford in 2 weeks' time.